So I'm very happy to be announcing our next session today, looking at smart building technology planning during a global crisis. And in this session, we still have Wayne Lico with us from Horizant, a systems integration firm. And I'm also delighted to be welcoming Nathalie Leclerc, a senior director of workplace solutions working for the Public Services and Procurement Division within the Government of Canada. And the real topic of today's conversation between Wayne and Nathalie is going to be the ongoing Future of Work project, for which the Government of Canada has been working on, looking at both a safe return to work and how to embrace the virtual and physical workplace into the future. And what's going to be very interesting about this discussion is we're going to be bringing together both the technology side of things and also the business side of things. And as we all know, working on these projects, it's often not only a technology problem. You need to be thinking through the business processes and business workflows alongside any technology project. So with that, I'm very pleased to welcome Nathalie and Wayne to our virtual stage. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Susan. Bonjour, Nathalie.
Bonjour.
Thanks for the intro. And we have a pretty full agenda here today. And so I'm going to be pretty quick on agenda and really want to make sure that I give the floor to Nathalie to go into some of these discussion points. We may have time for Q&A. As Susan said, by all means, submit your questions as we go through. I thought what would be important is just a very, very quick background. I'm not doing it justice, as Nathalie would concur with me, but they're really looking as PSPC is the landlord for the Government of Canada, I guess is a simple way to put it. And they are looking to establish a common practice across the Government of Canada for the future of work. And of course, the pandemic and the idea of the unassigned seating and everything that goes along with that is really the genesis of what we're going to be talking about. So we have three topics, three kind of bullet points, if you will, that Nathalie is going to expand upon. And I'll start with the first one, which is keys to project approval. So I'll let Nathalie talk a little bit, and then I'll come back with a couple of points on the technology front.
Great. So the two projects I'm going to speak about are easing of restrictions for an eventual return to safe workplaces, and how that led to a Future of Work project. So as our return to work was being contemplated over the spring and summer months, it was necessary to have both a methodology in place, which you can see here on the slide. So we approached it from an agile perspective in the scope of a plan, assemble, and prepare, with key pillars in place of communicate, gather data, and manage change. So in light of those principles, the early engagement of stakeholders was key. And it sounds a little bit banal, but it's actually very, very important to ensure that we bring people together from a senior management perspective and as stakeholders to ensure that we have a common approach and not 25 ways of bringing people, so that we have consistency or some level of consistency across the federal government. And this in light of the fact that each deputy head is responsible for the return to work in their workplace. We also ensured that in the planning of the return to work, that we had cross-departmental collaboration. And that means from an employer perspective, so from a health perspective, from a CIO perspective, so both the CIO from a technology moving forward and into the future, as well as the enablement of a technology, which we in the federal government facilitate through a shared services organization. Wayne alluded to, building on what we have. So building on existing evidence. So we in Workplace Solutions had elaborated our framework around modernized workspaces over the years, and we refer to that as our GC workplace from a branding perspective. Obviously, change is a constant, and sometimes impetus and moving people beyond the start line is really important. And so we were well poised and well positioned, having done our research and documented our processes around what the GC workplace entailed around, technology, mobile access control, modern workspaces that are easy to configure and easy to clean as the COVID-19 forced some of those elements. As well, we had evidence that it was easier to reconfigure workplaces in light of the COVID guidelines using the GC workplace templates. So again, the pandemic provided us a huge opportunity to optimize on the modernized spaces for the return to workplace initiative. It was also really important to communicate where within the realm of the future of work, both GC workplace had its space and its place, as well as how we were facilitating all of the guidelines around COVID-19 instructions from our health authorities. So how did we bring all of this together to, a palatable recipe is what we used an agile methodology, which gave us both an ability to reiterate and react quickly and engage and bring forth more guidelines and more players as the scope evolved.
Great, thank you. And one of the key parts in the conversation you talked about was the IT and the idea of the technology. So, a lot of the conversation is around the business and the use cases. And again, in the particular case of PSBC, was looking at how they could leverage either existing technology or improve upon the technology to really kind of meet these needs and move everything forward. So it was building on a solid foundation of both data and technology to get there. Okay, so planning is great. And now it's the idea of how do you sustain and how do you keep the project moving forward?
So great. So for the segue, Wayne, so thank you for that from a technology and enablement perspective. We had within our portfolio a number of locales, which we refer to as GC co-working. So we've enlisted, as part of the modernization of the portfolio, a number of departments who use these locales as a shared space. So it's not assigned and belonging to one department, but it's a number of subscribers from multiple departments, actually 34 of them, who use these locales to promote a number of things from our future of work perspective. Notably, formal and informal networking, enablement of technology through a mobile app to access the spaces, sensors within these spaces, which absolutely do, as you related to, collect data and allow us to have really good decision points around how the usage of the spaces are done, as well as some of the comfort data that is available to us. And allows in this future, the next project, which we're working on, which is a Pathfinder, to move that technology forward into a reservation system. And a reservation system being key in light of an increased return to work, pending wave 2 outcomes of the pandemic, but allowing to ensure that for the health reasons, the reservation system gives us data around contact tracing and differentiates between intent of attending a workplace and use of the workplaces through a co-pro. So a co-pro is kind of a workplace ambassador who occupies the shared workspaces. So between intent of a reservation system and attendance validated through the co-pro, we allow for a holistic, we've created a holistic system around contract tracing, which our clients have been really leery of in terms of how do we ensure to measure and track any COVID cases that come to the workplace. Back to how we move the project forward, obviously, It's the old, or the new mantra of communicate, communicate, and communicate again. So that's been really important. We've set ourselves up in an agile manner with obviously an agile workplace. We have a leadership call on a daily basis. We have a core team call on a daily basis. We're virtually through Teams, through MS Teams, conducting ourselves with both scrum rooms and informal office hours to keep the communication up, including the chat. So if you're online, you're as up to date as you can be as the project evolves and materializes in place. The other key point of moving the project forward is we were on the Pathfinder project, we're assigned very, very aggressive timelines because it was there was a keen desire for our employee survey for some of the employees to return to their workplaces for personal well-being circumstances. So basically, we had been given an October 5th deadline to have a minimum viable product of opening workspaces for that particular cohort. So what it allows us to do is, instead of having everything tested and at 100%, we realize enablement in opening of sites, and what are the minimum requirements to enable us to do that. So we obviously had a minimum-based recruitment strategy. We had the essential tools around worker and employee onboarding. We had the first iteration of our reservation system, and we had a minimum number of sites based on anticipated demand for that first phase of opening. So while we weren't able, because of wave 2, to open on October 5th, I'm glad to report that our minimal viable product was ready to go with all included testing to ensure that we met the deadline that had been given to us. And working in an agile manner, in the principles that I've highlighted before, and focusing, instead of focusing on the mountain, focusing on the first base camp, case in point, minimum viable product, allowed us to meet those objectives.
Perfect. And again, you know, we've seen that in some of the case studies we talked about earlier, the idea of the phased approach. And really, Natalie, one of the things you were talking about there was the idea of the parallel to the business and the technology, and making sure that they were kind of moving together towards the common date and the common goal. So we've got a few minutes remaining here in the presentation, and still lots of good conversation to have. Opportunities for change in a time of disruption. Again, this topic is probably another half hour on its own, but how would you summarize some of this, Natalie?
So I think all of us engaged in the public service would be remiss if we weren't called to action to optimize on this great disruption in our time. And that disruption has caused or enabled the future of work and the modernization of both how we work to be realized. So again, not all the slides are shown here, but we basically, from the earlier slide, also framed our work around 3 components: the workforce, the workplace, and the organization of work. So how we brought those 3 things together, those 3 elements together as an opportunity perspective, is we focused on all of these elements that are highlighted here. So how do we, ensure that in the future of work and in where we want to be as a public service, focus on agile and digitization? How do we look to the organization of work and our workforce to look at new methods of measuring productivity? So back to management of change, we all have in our organizations some resistance to change and some inhibitors, or what we thought previously were inhibitors to progress and modernization of the way we work. The pandemic basically obviously eroded a lot of those elements, specifically in the area of workforce and organization of work, in enforcing a lot of management to trust their employees and move to an outcome-based measurement of productivity and outcome. So again, with data points, that's really important. Experience is the new way of working through technology and tools, and behaviors, because all of a sudden we're going to reserve and identify intent before heading to a workplace. So it requires a different way of working and a different user experience. So obviously that user experience is key in ensuring that a reservation system is agile, easy to use, minimum clicks, and that gives the user experience a very positive way along with their journey of returning to work. It also allows for developing new and expanded service offerings based on our mission. So as a real estate provider and accommodation provider for the Government of Canada, based on all these factors, is our mission still the same? Is it about a workplace, or is it really about the achievement of outcome within a workplace based on different departments, programs, and missions? So it provokes or allows for a significant rethink of our place in the process, which is always a welcome opportunity for those of us who thrive in those types of ever-changing and progressive environments. Couldn't talk about all these themes without talking about culture. Culture is a significant anchor, and how do we not lose the really good elements of culture that bring people together, but also create space for a lean and a move forward of culture to embrace new ways and new ways of being, new ways of thinking, and new ways of serving, with all of the parameters of diversity, inclusiveness, and many others. Lastly, it's all around outcomes. So how do we facilitate the achievement of service to Canadians and facilitate the realization of work by our employees in PSPC and in real property, and serve the Government of Canada clients with workplaces that enable an agile organization of work and a looking forward to the talent across the spectrum from a workforce perspective. So I'll leave it at that for that piece, Wayne.
Well, merci, Nathalie. That was very good and a lot of great information. I know we're a minute or two over, so I'm going to keep this quick here, because as a final comment, one of the things, again, that Nathalie highlighted in her conversation was the trust and communication here. I've made a link here to, I think, a great session that talks about that, and a trust barometer. I encourage that most people would understand and embrace the idea of the communication and how the employees are looking to the leaders for that trust in the return to work. So, Susan, over to you. Merci encore, Nathalie.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Wayne, and particularly Natalie for taking some time out of your day to take us through that very exciting program. Good to hear more about that. So we're going to push on now, and I'm going to welcome some more corporate speakers to our virtual stage. So I'm just going to head off now and round up the next panel. But we do have some awesome speakers, facility managers and workplace managers covering both the office and hospital sector. So look forward to joining you shortly.